We're almost the end of Stage 3, and so, as with all things, it's as good a time as any for a retrospective, and so, let's take a quick look at the Dallas Fuel. Dallas is a fan favorite, you could definitely say that, but they've struggled a ton, and I guess now it's a question of why. How did we get to this point, and how can the Dallas Fuel look to improve heading into their Stage 4, and hopefully for them, the playoffs later on down the road? At this point, the stage playoffs are probably out of the question, barring some sort of mathematical miracle, but even still, it's looking very, very unlikely, and so it's to look towards the future here for the Dallas Fuel. Let's take a look at how we got here, though. And for Dallas, it all starts obviously at the end of Season 1 in Stage number 4, where for the first time in franchise history, they made the stage playoffs. Off the back of a new patch, changes in the coaching staff, understanding how Brigitte worked, and just generally a revamped mentally roster, things started to look up for the Dallas Fuel, and they made it to the stage playoffs as mentioned, where they lost to the New York Excelsior, the best team in the league at the time. Heading to Season 2 though, right, things looked up for the Dallas Fuel. Suddenly their roster was in a good space mentally, they had dealt with some of the issues they'd had at the end of Season 1, and they were starting to win. They started to look like they knew what they wanted to run, the GOATS composition coming in looking very strong, AKM on the Zarya, OG looking like a force on Reinhardt, and having a very structured roster otherwise. But, as always with Dallas, there has never been a time where things have looked great and things haven't gone wrong. Let's take a look at some of those issues. Right, their current record is 10-9, but that doesn't really speak as to what happened this stage where they're only 1-4. That one win coming against the Washington Justice of all teams. And they are not exactly known for their, shall we say, fantastic gameplay as of late. To add to that, in most recent games, OG has started looking lost, where he's admitted to having struggled, and even agreed with some analysis that he should be subbed out in favor of Trill. And in fact, that is what happened, where Trill had his first start, and even still, didn't look that much better. Did not improve the gameplay that much, struggled to really perform, and though likely due to nerves, as well as the fact that he was new to the team, it still spoke a ton about how Dallas was starting to perform on stage. Add to that, Unko not really having consistent performances, very high highs, but also very low lows, and you can just see how things start to add up. Taimu complaining on Twitter about his lack of playtime, and the community outburst as to who was actually playing that break role in the form of Zachary. That, of course, is not the end of all the negatives when it comes to Dallas, because then we have to deal with the outcry about Arrow, as he got his second attempt at the Overwatch World Cup USA roster, and it just seems to add, wherever Dallas goes, it seems like struggles follow. But enough about the players and the roster and the staff. Let's talk a little bit about what in fact is going wrong with Dallas. And simply put, it's their in-game performance, and the fact that they're playing against even tougher teams than they have prior. Some would argue that their initial great-looking standings was due to the fact they played some very, very easy teams at the beginning of the season. And honestly, you wouldn't be wrong. You're looking at playing teams like Houston, who, though looking better now, were obviously not of the same caliber in the previous stages, as well as Justice, Shanghai Dragons before they sort of rebuilt their roster, and so on and so forth. And now, heading into the later stages of the season, you can see that they've got one of the toughest looking schedules, as not only do they play against the Chengdu Hunters, but then the NYXL, culminating in playing some of the higher tier teams, especially some of the revamped rosters coming through. Now, obviously, the strength of schedule is an issue for them, but let's be real. If you want to be able to compete in the playoffs, in those grand finals, strength of schedule doesn't mean a whole lot. The answer, of course, is pretty simple. Just perform better. But that's easier said than done, and for the Dallas Fuel, there's a couple of things standing in their way. Now, some people would tell you, hey, just sub in the players that we've been talking about to this point. If Trill hasn't performed, put OG in, or vice versa. Zachary, who we've kind of highlighted over and over, why not just have him subbed out? Why not play one of the other players? I think this comes to the real heart of the issue with the Dallas Fuel. Due to the fact they're playing these super hard teams super late in the schedule, and the fact that they're running into roadblocks both mentally and perhaps physically. It's not easy, obviously, to play the game day in and day out without struggling somewhat. It just so happens that they're playing against teams that are at the tail end of that, or perhaps haven't had to deal with it yet. So for Dallas, those statements may come across as being pretty obvious to you and I, but realistically, that may be the thing that's furthest from them improving. And for Dallas, that might just mean that they need to stay the course and play it out for the remaining however many games they have left. 2 here obviously in this stage, but beyond that as well. To that end, let's take a quick look at the games upcoming for the Dallas Fuel, specifically in the Chengdu Hunters, whom Dallas has already played this stage, may I remind you, and obviously didn't fare out too well, where they dropped in a 3-1 fashion. For Dallas, the biggest issue obviously at this moment lies in the fact that their assault numbers really aren't that great. But even there's some signs of life. Against the Chengdu Hunters, which have been one of the most, shall we say, trailblazing teams with their flashy DPS play, Paris was the map that they in fact won, where they took the 3-2 over the Chinese squad. And for Dallas, they're going to have to learn from that particular game and go from there. Dallas, it looks like at times when they run against the super unorthodox look that Chengdu has, they kind of get lost, and it ends up being a place where they can't really force anything. However, Dallas has had the benefit of playing up against this team, and sometimes losing can be the greatest teacher. When you win, it's tough to see what mistakes that you may have made, what is really exploitable, and for Dallas, they may be able to take that and go from it. To note though, Chengdu did just play the Vancouver Titans and looked rather impressive against them. Though they did end up losing that series 3-1, off the back realistically of a ton of misplays from their side, they still had a lot of the upper hand in that series. So here we have a question. Which of the 2 situations really has the upper hand? Is it Chengdu with their superior DPS, or is it Dallas being able to learn from the mistakes that they had versus the Hunters themselves? And I think the answer will obviously be found out in the game itself, but we can make a couple of speculations here. If you're a Dallas fan, you have to hope that that particular look is going to in fact be a big difference maker. The fact that they've already played the Hunters and they've had a good track record in back-to-back matches against teams, or at least very closely played matches against teams. For the Hunters, you have to expect that the ability to play up very close to one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league, is really a mark in their cap. And so if you were to ask me, which one is probably the most likely, Chengdu winning or the Dallas Fuel being able to hold their own? Well, Chengdu comes out on top in this situation, no doubt about it. But that doesn't mean that Fuel fans should be without hope here. And I think that is obviously the bigger takeaway for this entire piece. For the Dallas Fuel and for the Fuel fans, this isn't a sprint. This is not about just having a flash in the pan play, about being the #1 team right here, right now. It's about the long-term goal. How does this team perform not just today, but in the years to come? And for Dallas, this groundwork they're laying here seems to be for the long term, where they aren't just running away and just forcing things to happen because they need to win right now. They're trying to grow as a team, they're trying to grow their players, and they're trying to put themselves in a position to succeed later on down the road. And I think that's admirable. And for Fuel fans, that should be something you look forward to. Again, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And for the Dallas Fuel, they're looking just down the road for that finish line. And while a midway checkpoint would be nice, it would not do to throw away the final goal for a play right now. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the content, a thumbs up would be appreciated. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments below. We read them, as always. And for more Overwatch content, stay tuned to Esports.